Today we're going to be learning how to make red wine roast, and this is done using a crock pot. A bunch of friends have asked me how to make it, and so I just figured I'd make a video, make life a lot easier for them. So prepare your vegetables in advance, thick cut on the onions right there. Garlic, there's only one way to use garlic, and that's fresh. The only thing that you need to know about garlic though is just smash it, don't dice it, and put that to the side. Now then, when it comes to the meat, it's pretty obvious. For every person, there should be a pound. So this is a 3-pound piece right here that you're looking at. And it is the oven roast cut, which means that there is one side of it that has some fat on it, and it is a little bit marbled in the meat itself. Never, ever use, ever, a lean piece of meat, or it's just not going to work. Now you're going to notice I'm going to be slightly light on salt. I do this on purpose because I don't like to oversalt my meat. Simple as that. I do like it for its flavor, and so all over this piece of meat, to include the fatty side, I put the salt. Medium heat is important to start the process of cooking the meat itself. I like to use olive oil for flavor. You can't go wrong with olive oil, but you can use whatever you want when it comes to an oil. Now, you saw me kind of eyeball all that, but that was about 2 tablespoons, maybe even 3 tablespoons of oil. And when it comes to the meat, I'm going to leave it in there to get singed by the heat for about 3 minutes. And it's important that you go through this process on every single side of this meat. And the reason why is, well, here, let me show you. It's important because this is going to make the difference between an awesome oven roast and a ho-hum oven roast. And this checkering that I'm going to be looking for looks like this. You'll have the gray and you'll have the red, and this is perfect. And now I'm just going to make sure I concentrate all over the whole piece of meat to include the fatty side. And that's going to take about another 9 more minutes, 10 more minutes to complete. And thanks to video editing, I'm not going to make you keep watching that only, right? So another 3 minutes on another piece aside. And for the parts that are not so easy to get to, just force it as best as you can. But like I mentioned, it makes all the difference. Behind the scenes, I turned on the crock pot on high. High heat is important if you're going to want to make this piece of meat in 4 hours. So for every 3-pound piece, it'll take about 4 hours to cook on high. If you do it on low, which takes about 8 hours to complete, that's kind of like the set it and forget it format. Which is great. You're just going to have some mushy vegetables. And I mean really mushy. But you know what? Preference. Some people like it that way. Now when it comes to the onions, I'm just going to brown them so that way I can get them prepared for the final half of what I'm going to do. And caramelization is another name for it, but I'm just using the original olive oil and whatever fat came from the meat there. Everyone has a different method on this, but keep an eye on it. And once you get them nice and caramelized, they don't have to be super translucent. But one thing you didn't see is that I already turned down the temperature to low. And I'm now going to put about a full cup of Cabernet Sauvignon. You can use Beaujolais Nouveau. You can use any red wine that you like. Just don't put a $30 bottle inside of there. It's kind of a waste. Unless you drink the whole bottle after. I don't know, right? But put it right in there with the onions. Can't go wrong. And then 2 spices that I like to put in there, about a palmful of thyme, which is maybe about a tablespoon and a half, and a palm of basil leaves there. And again, that will get that all nice and ready for you. And just leave it on low, uncovered, and stir. What will happen is that once that is all nice and done, you're going to go into the crock pot, and it's important. Don't forget to take out the meat before you do this. I put the garlic at the very end, right? You didn't see it happen, but I did it. I put the garlic already into the onions as I was getting the meat here. So the fresh garlic has already went in. And then I'm just using that as a bed for the meat. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put about 2 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce You can use soy sauce or any salty sauce if you want to. I just like the flavor of Worcestershire. And I'm going to now add water to the water line. And remember not to overdo the amount of water needs in here. It's not supposed to go over the meat, guys. I'm going to set it for 2 hours. In about 1 hour, I will check on the meat, which I did. And you'll notice that because you'll see that there's some onions on top of it. But that already smells pretty darn delicious. I'm going to take the meat, I'm going to put it on a plate. So that way, I'm going to start adding the vegetables that I pre-cut already. I personally like to use carrots. So there's about a good pound of carrots that I'm going to stick inside of this. And about a half a russet potato. Preference again is what matters, but just remember to use hearty vegetables, not the soft ones. If you're going to use mushrooms, for instance, that kind of goes in at the very end instead of at the 2 hour mark. Comes down to simple amounts of what you want to do. Celery is also a good one too if you want to. So after you stick the vegetables in, do a little bit of a stir. Make sure that you get all that mixed in there. Try to keep the onions, believe it or not, on the bottom. Not a requirement, just a method that I like to follow through with. And here's another thing. Don't forget to flip the meat. You've already cooked one side on the bottom. Now it's time to go to the other round. And generally, it's important for you to nestle that in, but also to make sure it gets down in the center of all of that. At this juncture, you're also going to put about a half a cup of wine, about another half a cup of water. That way we'll have enough fluids for the next 2 hours while it's going to be cooking. And I think one last thing that you can do if you want to is you can put salt and pepper. And you know what? On the water, guys, you can use vegetable broth or beef broth if you want to. But as I mentioned before, I don't like to oversalt. So it's that simple. What you're going to do is you're going to set it up for another 2 hours, cover it up, and like I do, check it about once every hour just to make sure. That's why all of a sudden you're going to start seeing vegetables on top of the meat. And what I was checking for was water. But you can see that this already smells delicious and you don't even see it right now. So I'm going to take this piece of meat and I'm going to put it on a wood board or cutting board, and I'm going to be looking for two things. I'm going to be looking for the ability for my fork to easily go into the meat, and then once I do cut it, this is what I'm looking for. It basically looks like a stained meat, and that means the red wine has gotten in there and is already ready for awesomeness and deliciousness. I do highly suggest, believe it or not, for this thing to be chilled and then reheated again in a pan before you do it again. Of course, sliced, but that's my suggestion, not a requirement. Just make sure you have your salt and pepper on the side ready for any guests to eat. Remember, 1 pound per person, and I promise you they will pretty much likely going to finish it up. Bon appetit.